Hey guys, so I just watched a video called Richard Dawkins Breaks a Man's Heart, in which Richard Dawkins answers a question from a member of the audience who he presumably knows, and the gentleman says, how do you answer somebody, I'm paraphrasing here, how do you answer somebody who has had a 50-year relationship with God and who has witnessed actual events brought about by God? I'm paraphrasing what he said, but what he's basically talking about is his personal experience of God. And for me, this is probably one of the saddest parts about dealing with theists. My mother is, let's see, what year is it, 2013? My mother is 73 now, and she is a passionate Christian, although she doesn't really belong to any denomination anymore. And she can't resist talking to me about God, and as soon as she does, we usually get into an argument. And one of the things that I put forth is the evidence, and she says, well, how can you argue with the evidence? She believes that when she was pregnant with me, she was in hospital and she was going to have me aborted. She had a challenging life. She was a single mother at a time when it was not socially acceptable to be a single mother. She was impregnated by a Negro at a time when black and white relationships were definitely frowned upon. And she was going to get me aborted, and she says that an angel came into her room at the hospital and told her not to get me aborted, and she uses that as compelling evidence that that the whole Jesus, God, angels thing is true. And against her personal experience of an event that changed her entire life, it's quite difficult to argue with her, because the obvious answer is, well, Mum, you were under tremendous stress. You were feeling guilty because you had a child who you already had a connection with, but you were going to abort for social reasons, and your mind fabricated a solution that would enable you to keep the child and feel as if it was the command of a higher power. And she actually named me Gift of God. Matthew apparently means gift of God. Now the interesting thing is, she wasn't a Christian at that time, and we didn't come from a Christian family. We came from a spiritual family, which is to say that my grandmother was into spiritualism, ghosts and Ouija boards and all that nonsense. But of course, to tell your mother, well, actually you're deluded, and in fact I've said that. I've said, Mum, I'm sorry, but you were almost certainly hallucinating, brought about by the stress of the situation. But it's very difficult to deal with somebody who's hallucinating, who clearly believes that they see something in front of them. The old joke about hallucinating an oasis in the desert is a classic example. Now, I don't know if that's true, that anybody ever does that, but again, if that were true, is exactly the same forces at play, namely that you're dying of thirst, and your brain creates for you something that you need to see. And people all the time create things which they want to believe in. It's not just confirmation bias, but their minds will fill in the blanks for them quite often. It's already well known that your senses are far from infallible, and that your brain can be very easily induced to create altered states of reality, if you like. The whole thing with certain drugs is that they can change your entire perception of reality. But you know, I mean, even for example, it was discovered some time ago that having an electric alarm clock by your bed can produce an electric field, which in some people creates a sense of an out-of-body experience. And there are centres of the brain that control your sense of self. You know, your vision of yourself, if you like, and these centres of the brain can be tricked or activated in such a way that you genuinely get a sense that you are outside yourself, looking at yourself, which coincidentally is one of the explanations for out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. But the fact is that the human brain is proven time and time again to be able to generate things which are not true. You know, hallucination sounds, hallucination visions. So for Christians to say, well, or for people of any religion to say, well, that's impossible in my case, or it's true for everybody except me, is delusional in the first place. You know, and as much as these beliefs may be sincerely held, that doesn't mean to say that they're genuine. Now, when I was a boy of about 10, I was in a Christian family, and I desperately wanted to please my mother by being a good Christian. You know, I was quite a willful child. I wouldn't say I was a nasty child, but I was just kind of, well, I guess nowadays you'd say I had Asperger's or ADHD or something. I was wild and I just didn't think things through before I did them. And we were in a big Christian seminar. I think it was a Billy Graham thing, and I desperately wanted to be this good Christian for my mother. And I was looking at the front where I think Billy Graham was talking, and above it was this kind of big space, and I suddenly became convinced that I saw Jesus there, standing there. And of course, he was the exact Jesus figure of the paintings. You know, he was standing there with his arms kind of out, being kind. He had the beard. He was white. You know, and you would think that if you were going to see Jesus, that you would see him as he actually was, not as he had been portrayed by Western artists. So that really disproved that. You know, I mean, the hallucination of a 10-year-old boy desperately trying to please his mother is just one example. But obviously, people believe that they have these transcendent experiences, these conversations with God. You know, I do sports, and very often after sport you get a tremendous feeling of well-being. And when I was a Christian as a teenager, and I would pray, you know, my mind was filled with all kinds of nonsense when I was a kid, and it made it very hard for me to sleep. And I would pray, and then after I pray I'd get this tremendous sense of well-being. But you know, the fact that you can induce that exact same feeling just by doing sports or whatever, and even just sometimes when you just finish a day's work, or you just accomplish something good, you get that same well-being. But at the time I would interpret that as being God coming and looking after me. But in actual fact it was just the relief of the belief that God was there to look after me. So the sad thing is that Christians are very sincere in their belief that they have a relationship, that their prayers are being answered. You know, it's been demonstrated time and again that prayers produce results no better than chance. And I'm sure that any Christian who stops and thinks about it will realise that that's the case. You know, that you've had as many prayers not answers as you've had answers, and quite often the ones that you think you've had answered were more to do with actions you took yourself. You know, I mean, you wanted a positive outcome, and you went forward to make that happen, and it was only the belief that you were being watched out for that made the prayers seem as if they were just coming to be. But you know, I have a lot of sympathy for theists who believe that they're being looked after by a higher power. But if you are a Christian or a Muslim or whoever, and you think that your feelings are unique, you know, ask yourself this: why is it that people of every religion report exactly the same feelings as you feel. Even if they don't pray to your God, they still have that same belief. People who believe, a lot of modern Christians will argue, oh well, they're all praying to the same God, but when natives pray to the sun god and the dragon god and whatever, all their weird and wonderful gods, you can't say they're all praying to the same God, but yet they're still getting the same transcendent feeling, the same feeling of communication with their God, and I think that you, if you were going to be honest, should be able to answer that question. Why is it that people, no matter what their religious beliefs, all experience the same feelings? You take care.